Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Holistic Home Health Podcast with Barry Mankin. So happy to be back with you guys. Today I am going to be asking Barry just some commonly asked questions that I hear a lot from you guys just when I'm on the phone or we're going over our process. These are just things that I often hear. The first one I want to ask is about air sampling. So we take air quality samples a lot as part of our process when we're doing a mold inspection, just establishing a baseline. And one of the things that people often ask is, what are we actually seeing in the air? Like in those samples, when that sample is coming back from the lab and the lab results, like what are you looking at? What can you see with that sample?
Basically, there's a panel of molds that we're going to look for.
Okay.
And different labs do different panels, you know.
Yep.
The idea is we want to look for type and concentration levels of molds. That's mostly what you always want to look for. Type and concentration, that's the top two things. And with that said, air sampling is pretty controversial in the industry because there's a lot of bad information out there. And a lot of people have different experiences with that, where maybe a home inspector has come in and done some air sampling and they didn't find anything. And all of a sudden there's, something behind a wall that they're like, oh my gosh, we're all going to, die. So everything has value, right? Much like the ERMI, which we talked about the ERMI on one of our previous segments. But in my opinion, the start of a process, you should always know your highest percentage of influence. Your highest percentage of influence is what is in the air. It's what you're breathing. So it doesn't mean that it is the end-all be-all and it's one type of process that's going to stand on all four legs to say, oh, your house is clear of mold, because there's mold everywhere, right? But for hidden mold, for mold that's settled out, because you have suspended particulates and you have stuff that's settled out, we might not see history that way.
Right.
But we would see during the current conditions what is in the air. We're going to look for type and concentration based off of a certain panel, most of the biggies. And if we have some hits on certain things, if something's obvious in one of those two categories, then we'll see something like that at what we would call a baseline assessment of a house.
Yeah, that's nice, because sometimes I get that question and I'm like, I don't know. I know we're definitely seeing something. Like, it's an important part of the process. I'm not exactly sure what. So I'm definitely not the brains behind the company.
She's good.
Maybe just a personality hire. I don't know. Anyway, so next question that I have here is about plants. So, I love having plants in my home. I know a lot of other people love having plants in their home, but can I have too many plants, or just what should I keep in mind how could that be affecting the air quality of my home?
There's a misnomer, an anomaly that says the more plants in your home, the more oxygen you're going to produce.
Okay.
There's several studies out there that show that it really does not help that much.
Right. Like, we're not having plants to purify my air. I'm
Some
having
people,
plants because they look pretty.
Yeah. Some people think they are, is my point.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And it doesn't, if it makes you feel good, that's great.
Yeah.
But what it does do is it usually increases your basidiospore count.
Okay.
You can have other molds associated with that depending on how you're watering, because it's, food and water, which we always talk about. And if you're overwatering them, or it's not taking that water in to effectively help that plant only, and you have residual water and you start growing things in the pot, that's another issue, right? So water management of those is another thing. And allergens come into play, so you kind of pay attention to your health.
I see. Okay.
So it's a yes but, or a yes and. What are the effects? A good way to monitor that is just with a good, comprehensive, just an air quality monitor in your house. Can just see what are my particulate levels, which could go to things like that.
Okay.
So, and it doesn't mean they're bad. It just means that you just know what to expect from them.
Okay.
And basidiospores are common, they're outside. It's a common type of mold, but you're going to get higher concentrations, just like you're living in the woods, except you're bringing the woods into the house. So plus your cleaning regimen goes up and all these other things.
Kind of in that same vein, let's talk about candles, incense. I love candles. This is I know we have this conversation a lot. I love candles and incense, but yeah, sometimes you advise against like candles and incense, diffusers, things like that. So why is that? And what are maybe some alternatives?
Whether it's candles or essential oils or, any of those types of airborne surfactants. Other
Surfactants.
Yeah.
Right. Of course.
Word for the day, surfactant.
Google.
I wish
What
Pee Wee Herman was here and he could
is-
scream. Yeah.
Right.
We talked about in the last segment about particulates in the air. Everything is tied, well, a lot of things, most things are tied to particulates. So that's stuff that we're exposed to, that we're breathing, other than getting our load down and taking care of all the top 7 things like we talked on our last segment. Whatever's in the air, that's going to affect, other than the carbon, aspect of that, adding more to that, the surfactant quality, it's usually an oil or a wax, something that's sticky.
Yep.
The stuff that's in the air that we breathe that has all these things on them, between the viral and the bacterial and fungal content that's in the air, along with anything else, that's going to stick to that, right? So that particulate that's carrying all those influences or all those contaminants on it is now getting delivered to our lungs because, again, we are the filter in the house. Now it's sticky, and it sticks to that. And instead of like bouncing off or getting around, like we're bringing it in, and now we have to expel that. So other than sticking on our stuff, you'll see some like what we call ghosting as it relates to like some condensation with some thermal transfer on the building materials and stuff like from either candles or plug-ins. Even the plug-ins are the worst thing.
Oh, I don't use those.
If you have a plug-in,
Microplastics.
get rid of it. Okay?
Yeah.
Chemicals galore. So, but all that stuff, other than the VOCs and all the other things that are associated with that from a chemical standpoint, it's the surfactant quality. And we're exposed to that in so many different ways. And it may smell good, but if it smells good, there's a reason. And it's usually because it's not natural. And even if it is, it's got a surfactant. So I'm going to tell you that you should have like a neutral, if you're having a party and it's, it's Christmas, fine. But if you do
Once a
something
year.
like, every day, and you're
Who would do that?
Yeah. Or if you're a sensitized individual,
Yeah.
worst thing for you.
Okay, incense?
Same.
Same thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's you're putting particulates in the air, and what's in that. So again, it like essential oils we were talking about.
Yep.
Everybody's like essential oils, and not that, hopefully don't come after me, essential oils. All
Come
right.
after him.
But use them, rub them on your skin, get the absorbent quality of that. Whatever they tell you to do. I'm not a doctor, but like, there's good qualities to things.
Yeah.
But there's always a trade-off. So you have to understand, you've got to know what your trade-off is. And with that particular case, it's oil, So what comes with it is, it's just like fresh air. We talk about fresh air. We open that window, we get oxygen.
Yep.
What comes with it? All the baggage,
Yeah,
especially this time of year with the pollen and everything.
Yeah, I see.
So it's either a yes and or a yes but, what does that mean?
It's a trade-off.
It is.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Super helpful. Okay, so next question I have, kind of shifting gears a bit, is when does someone know that they should test for mold, right? If they don't see it visibly, but maybe they're experiencing some symptoms, but a lot of times what I get is some people are experiencing something in the home, but then someone else is like, oh, it's fine. Like, you're just overreacting. There's nothing. So how do I know, like, okay, there might be an issue in my home. I should definitely look into getting a mold inspection done.
Yeah, well, typically there's a scoring process or something like that that's associated with it, where people are going to fill out a survey, whether it comes from us or someplace else, and they're going to talk about their what their symptoms are, what they're experiencing, what prompted the call in the first place, right?
Yeah.
And then once we find that out and how they're feeling, whether it's the Haywood score or whatever scoring method you use, it gives us some context to kind of start a process. This is rarely, if people are having physical issues, it's rarely like a silver bullet. And again, we're trying to diagnose the house and treat the house like a person. So, which we say all the time, you don't just take like 2 pills or you get an operation or whatever you got to do for your health and say, okay, I'm good for the rest of my life. No,
Yeah.
that's not how it works. So
yeah, totally.
it's the same kind of thing. You have to find out what prompted it, start a process, and then it's more of an air quality issue than it is a mold issue. Typically, mold is part of that, but it's a health issue. So I would say we just have to reframe our mind to say, is this a mold issue or is this a health issue? It's always a health issue. Mold can be a part of that process, but usually there's a lot of bacteria involved. There's dust mites, there's cleaning involved. So then it's sources, so we have to diagnose the house much like you get a diagnosis from a doctor. And a good inspection, a good baseline assessment, and if your area is more mold prone like ours is because we have so much moisture available, then you might start with that. But again, you're looking at everything. You're looking at the HVAC. You're getting a good general inspection. And then when there's some flags, you're going to hone in on the specialty stuff. But usually we would start out with some sort of a baseline assessment of the home.
Super helpful. Okay, next question is about air purifiers. And we touched on it a bit in the last episode. So if you guys are curious about that more in depth, then you can listen to the past episode. But I get a lot of questions about air purifiers because maybe people say, like, we don't know if we have mold, but we have so many air purifiers. Like, we have them in every room. Like, I don't know how we could have mold. So what do we need to know about air purifiers? But more importantly, how should we be using them?
Sure.
Right?
I always make the reference to a cake.
Okay. Love cake.
Yeah, everybody loves cake. Or in the South, it's pie, right? So, everybody loves pie here. But cake, you have all these layers, you have all these ingredients, right?
Yep.
To get just the perfect cake, right? And so most of these things are practical that we talk about, which we talked about in the previous episode. Once you establish that, purification's icing. Okay. So you need to think about doing the practical things first. Step up your game. The reason why we have to be this intentional, the reason why it's such a big deal is because of our houses. Our houses are not built the same. They're less resistant to the moisture issues that feed the mold or the bacteria or whatever. So here's the thing. If we're treating it like icing, everybody starts with the gizmo and they spend X amount of dollars on a box that fixes everything. It's rarely one thing, number one.
Okay.
It's always habits and looking for sources first.
Yeah.
Then it's management. And all they are is a management device. And they all have different levels of efficacy or efficiency to do their job for performance. And that's all over the map. So number one, if they have a source and their fix was to do purifiers all over the place, guess what's contaminated and where they're bionesting? In those purifiers.
Oh, wow.
Now
really?
you have all this content because they do their job
right.
And they draw all the bad characters into one place and give them a place to hang out and live. And then they spit it. Because if that's their problem, I guarantee if that's their fix, instead of like getting the house looked at and diagnosed, guess where stuff's growing?
Ooh, in the air purifier.
And then spitting it back out because if that's their fix, I doubt they're maintaining that. If they just want to spend money on something to fix the problem and not get a diagnosis, again, we talk about this before, prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. And if the prescription is more cowbell, or if the prescription is, that's always the prescription. But if the prescription is an air purifier, why? If they have a smell and they have a pain point that creates a reason for them to go after this, it's like, find out why first, get to the root of the issue, then if you just want better, then get the purifier. The purifier is not the fix for a source, period. Yeah. And if they have 20 of them, or however many of them, if they have multiples because they got a problem, they're not dealing with the problem. They're like, oh, I don't want to, here, I'll just buy another thing. I don't have time for this or whatever. You need a good diagnosis. So they're not managing it. They're not cleaning those. and they're just making it worse.
Yeah.
And they're spending a lot of money for nothing.
Do you ever, like, whenever you're doing an inspection, do you ever, like, open those up and
All the
see,
time.
like, what's it? Do you ever show the
Click.
people of, like,
It's like, look at that. And if it's like that, it's in their HVAC too.
Yeah.
Because if they're, then they're, their filter and their HVAC, and it's the wild card is always the HVAC, right? But if they're not doing that and that's their fix, because to get 20 of those, they're not getting to the source. They're not creating the habits. They're not doing the things. They're not being preventative in their maintenance. So that they only need maybe 2 or 3 purifiers,
right?
Just for better air quality. Instead, they're trying to like push things away and say, we don't want to deal with this. We don't know what it is. It's kind of like the boogeyman in the dark kind of thing. I just want to put more covers on and protect myself. And at the end of the day, like if something's in that room, you got to get it out of there.
Or maybe they're just like Googling things, right? And they're like, what should
Google.
I do? Right. And Google is just saying,
marketing is
to improve your air. You should get an air purifier, things like that.
And again, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that it's bad. I don't ever like.
Oh yeah, it seems like it's really great at maintaining already good levels, maybe kind of preventative, but it's not a solve
at all.
Right?
But people treat it like a solve. You got to know your limitations. Clint Eastwood every time.
Every time.
Him and Kenny Rogers are probably the top 2 philosophers on the planet.
What?
You didn't know that?
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I was thinking, I was going more like Socrates.
No.
Kind of, okay.
No, these 2 guys.
Sure.
Then, maybe a little bit of Socrates.
Yeah.
You know?
He's like way down.
Way down.
Way down there. Okay.
Way down.
Okay, I see. Okay. Next question. So a lot of times people have found mold in their home. Maybe it's on drapes. Maybe it's even on a couch. I've heard like on clothes. So this question pertains specifically to like belongings. So once things are remediated, like maybe they had a like really bad mold, people want to know like, do I need to like throw all of my clothes away or like my belongings, or like, is there a way to wash this and get rid of it?
I've dealt with this a lot.
Really tricky. Okay.
And even recently too.
I'm sure it's not like a, X plus Y equals Z.
Yeah, and this is where we try to build a bridge with, especially with the medical community as it relates to like functional doctors. The functional medicine side, there's kind of like this tension. There's a tension between the, and I'll get to my point, but there's a tension between the medical industry, between the functional side and the traditional, right? And then there's another tension between the functional side and the environmental side, right? Because they take care of people, we take care of the environments, right? And so what happens is there's some crossover. We always encourage everybody to stay in their lane, right?
Yep.
Good intention, all of those things, absolutely. But like, and the doctors really want to help the people, but we want to create relationships with good environmentalists that are out there in the field that understand the climate, that understand the specific microclimate that the people are living in, and work with those doctors so that we can help formulate things. Clothes is one of the big things that comes into play.
Yep.
As an example, twice just in the past few weeks, I've had 2 of my highly sensitized clients where we brought in a machine that is a great machine. It's called an Instascope that we have to evaluate the overall biological content in the house. These particular people, I mean, their house is clean. We've done baseline assessment. We've done a complete evaluation. We've had the HVAC clean and sanitized, validated that it's clean. They're still having symptoms from certain influences, right? So again, you're kind of clearing the mud a lot of times for a space, and then you're kind of bringing it in to get the basics done, and then it highlights specific areas or specific sensitivities from either sources that are still ongoing or residual, right? So now we're trying to hone in on what's the stuff that's still causing the problem. In this particular case, these 2 particular cases, it was clothing. And how did we find out? We took our scanner and we're literally doing a 3D image of the air live for all biologicals, viral, fungal, bacterial, allergen, TVOCs, even carbon dioxide.
And the Instascope picks that up in real time.
Real time. right?
Wow.
And then we create a port. So it's pretty nerdy, but we love it.
We love nerds.
But that's a diagnostic tool is what it is, just like any other diagnostic. It gives us a reason to take a sample in a certain location. As it relates to clothing, we're trying to hunt for things. And we're trying to figure out what's this. But part of that diagnostic process is that score on the front end that we talked about, to where we ask a lot of questions, just like a doctor would. When did this happen? You know,
How long?
How long ago? What happened during that process? How did that make you feel?
How did that make you feel?
Yeah, we laid on a couch. We talk about their childhood. It's
What's your relationship with your mom like?
Yeah, that's right. No, so not quite that far, but that's the idea. Is that we do a good screening on the front end.
Yep.
And through that, now I know what questions to ask even further. And it turns out that they were told by some doctors to wash the clothes in borax.
Uh-oh.
From their two previous houses ago. So it's either A, get rid of everything you have, or B, you can clean it, or they don't address it, right? Again, not their place to do that. Good intention, all aside. But like, that's where that bridge needs to be built on how to deal with these things that are affecting directly the people, their patients. And in this particular case, if our client has these issues, I'm trying to do the same thing with their house. So literally, we're testing, looking at all the different biologicals, looking at air infiltration on the house.
Yep.
What are the potentials? But then we get to, because we ask the right questions, hey, let's test the clothing. Because their clothing they still have, and their bedding.
Okay. Their bedding?
And their bedding.
That they're sleeping in 8 hours a night?
And not only that, they washed them religiously in borax 3 times.
Oh my god!
Because the doc said to.
Right.
And it's done. It's fixed. But you can't do it unless you verify.
Yeah.
That's right. We have to reassess. Did the efficacy of whatever we did work, and at what level? So, and we can measure all of that.
Yeah.
So literally, we're shaking the clothes.
Oh.
Let's look at these clothes versus these clothes. Here's the new clothes we bought. Here's the new clothes that we've worn and lived with and all that. Here's the blankets and here's these as part of our process throughout that room. And that room was a little bit hotter than the other rooms as it relates to total biologicals. We had a little bit of movement, so we do what's in the air, static, quiescent, right? And then we aggravate the air, and then stuff gets up in the air resuspended. Then we measure again to see the differential, which tells us something's on here and there's a reason why. And I know these people are clean because I've seen how they clean. Like, it's
extensive,
very clean, and they're minimalist too.
Yeah.
And literally, I go in there and then I'm like, why is this hot? Where is this from? Where is that from? Oh, that's from our house from 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Oh my god!
Let's test this. And literally, we shake the clothes. We shake the new clothes and the old clothes. The old clothes are full of bacterial and fungal. Right now, it doesn't give me species necessarily,
This is so overwhelming.
and they're bedding. But here's the problem: I don't know what types of molds. So we're probably talking about mycotoxin-related molds,
Right.
Which is sticky, which is microscopic. I mean, we've only been able to see that stuff for the past, 4 years maybe, if we're lucky.
Okay, yeah.
3 for us.
Yep.
But that stuff does not come out with borax. You might get
You just
a layer.
gotta throw it away, right?
Well, if I see Stachybotrys or Cotomium or really, really high counts of Aspergillus as just a general example, Aspergillus as an example, in clothing.
Yeah.
From a mold event or a water event that created mold conditions in a home.
Yep.
Anything that is fabricy, I'm telling them you can't clean that. Yeah.
Okay.
If we have certain levels of each one of those things or influences, we're going to say you could probably clean that. But the overall concept is the less permeable something is, the easier it is to clean it, right? As an example, drywall, the standard for drywall, you don't clean it, you remove it. It's permeable. The water gets in there and the mold grows in there with the roots. You can't get it out. Clothes are similar. Carpet, All that stuff is similar. So depending on type and concentration,
you may just need to chuck it.
that dictates a lot of that.
Okay.
And in their particular
so you definitely
case,
want to get it tested and then see.
so I might do like a sample. Every once in a while, I'll do samples of that. And I've got so many examples of that. I know we're short on time, but I got so many examples of that where I've tested clothes from other places and I found the mold that I don't want to see.
Oh, God.
And I'm like, you brought that here from the other place. You got to get rid of it. And you're wearing it every day and you're highly sensitized. You can't clean that.
This is so nerve-wracking.
Yeah. But there are other instances where it's not that bad.
Yep.
And they can clean it. But again, unless you test and verify, you don't know. We're dealing with microscopic things. And the mold remediation process is hard. We're dealing with things we can't see. It's easy to say, oh, that's got mold on it. We got to remove it, right? It's so trivial at that point to say, oh, should we test that or not? Like if you've got something on a piece of furniture, we know it's probably from relative humidity unless there's been a direct water source or it's been in a history of a place like that. We know we need to remediate it. It's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But it's not always the what, it's the how, right? Mm-hmm. And how is everything. Like in anything in life, it's the how. So we want to focus on that. We want to have a good diagnosis for people so that we can define a scope of work, whether people's personal items are related or not.
Yeah.
Deal with the building, and then history in that building can affect people just as much. And these people are highly sensitized, and they can't figure out why they're not getting well, whether it's mycotoxin related, which we talked about on a couple episodes before, I think, with EPS. Once we get it, we'll end up doing a whole episode probably just in mycotoxins and endotoxins and all the toxins that are related to these influences. Yep. But at the end of the day, it's about cleaning. Who should clean, how they should clean. That's where it gets a little dicey. And all the information that's out there that says, thus saith whoever the influencer is online is baloney.
Right.
It's their experience. That becomes the filter of the information. And that's where I'm going to say that is flawed. So it doesn't mean that they're not valid in their experience, and it doesn't mean that their information isn't valid. But we have to take it with a grain of salt and say holistically, right? What are the influences? How do we deal with them? And how do we get to a better baseline in this house so that we can have a healthier home and let the people heal and trust their doctors, build a bridge with those relationships? That's kind of the idea.
Well, on that note, we are closing out for the day. Thank you guys so much for joining.